Professor Kgalema, who is a poet, in one of his poems, writes the word past, present, future as one word, because he's a poet. Those of us who are not poets would write it in 3 words. So he writes it as one word, and he says, past, present, future is always now. Which means that the past will cast its shadow on the present. But our responsibility in the present is to create the future, not to be prisoners of the past, because that past we inherit, and it gives us context as to why things happened the way they did. But we are not supposed to be prisoners of the past. Our role is to create, a future as prescribed in our Constitution. And that's why, as leaders, in our national discourse, we must always be alive to this responsibility of the signage, so that it points us forward rather than backwards. And that is really the primary concern. And I hope that we will be able to, through agency, because as I said, human beings are not helpless, and they don't have to accept, you don't have to accept, shabby treatment, you don't have to accept, being put under the jackboot and so on. The human beings must always, serve to change conditions for the better. Now, to the extent that there is looting and so on, we got to strengthen, the whistleblowers. We got to strengthen our laws and regulations in terms of lifestyle audits, so that nobody who steals from the public should ever get away with it. That is the main deterrent. Deterrent is not long sentences, imprisonment sentences. Deterrence is the knowledge that you will not get away with it. Yeah. So that's what we need to strengthen. That's what we need to strengthen. If we fail to do that, not only will the fiscus be emptied, it will itself be stolen. Our commitment to ethical leadership will be measured by the lived experience of communities on the ground. Because if, we donate, we accumulate, and then we donate for charity and so on. Charity does not address deprivation and poverty. It freezes it. And so if we are to address poverty and deprivation, we must do more than, donating to charities, and seek to empower people, find change agents in each household. If there's a young person of school-going age, we must do something about it. That's the only way in which we'll be able to break the transmission of poverty and deprivation from one generation to another in the same household. And of course, ethical leadership, as I said, in the essence, is about being your brother's keeper. And so we must do everything in our power to live that mantra. Yeah. The Statistician General, in his report, census report of 2011, states that basic education in the white communities is doing fine. And he says basic education in the Indian communities is doing very well. But he says basic education in the African communities, in the colored communities, is getting worse. And when I read that report, I asked myself, wherein lies the problem? So I had to go back and do some reading. Edgar Brooks wrote a book in the 40s on native education. At that time, native education was the responsibility of the churches, not the state. And so he explains why native education at that time was of a much better quality until Bantu education was introduced in 1954. And Bantu education, the way it was introduced and engineered, was by taking over teacher training colleges from the churches. So the teachers who had, up to that point, been trained through the mission schools were now to be weeded out of the education system, out of the profession. And a new cohort of teachers was produced. And Dr. Verwoerd spelled this out very clearly, that these teachers must be trained such that they produce a black child who will not aspire to any station in life above specific levels of labor. And so the education was designed such that the teachers would be very poor in mathematics and natural sciences. So through a process of natural attrition and political targeting of teachers who were also politically active, all the old school teachers were weeded out of the system. And once this process of producing a new cohort of teachers got to reproduce itself, they never had to do anything ever again. And so, of all the vices and excesses of the apartheid system, everything else that they ever did pales into insignificance. The most serious crime of apartheid was the introduction of Bantu education. And that's what we're still grappling with today. I hope that with modern means of communication, it may be possible to fast track the production of a new cohort of teachers for the African child. Because Africans are in the majority in this country. For as long as basic education is weak, as the statistician general indicates, the economy of this country will forever remain weak, because Edgar Brooks, in this book I alluded to earlier on, says Bantu education was a unique system of education. It is the only system of education in the world which aimed to produce people who would not be active in the economy, people who would not be productive economically. So, critical thinking, therefore, is a function of basic education. I agree with you, that's where it should really be inculcated. Now, I live in Johannesburg. When I was growing up, Bantu education was introduced just as I was, into my first year in school. And those days it wasn't called grade R, it was called Dom A. That's what it was called. So there were many schools in Alexander Township and so on. And I was a student at Elena at St. Michael's, which was an Anglican school. And when Bantu education was introduced, the church had to give up the school, including the buildings, the school buildings. So I remember we were one school, but one class would be in another part of the township in a garage, and another one in another part of the township in a church, another one under a tree in a yard, backyard, somewhere else in part of the township. But the church retained the schools for the white community. And so just across, walking distance from Alexander Township in Waverley, there's still a beautiful church school. It's now a private school, St. Mary's for Girls. Yeah, it's still there. And all you have to do is to visit that school and go to the township to understand the damage of Bantu education. Now, as youth from rural areas and townships who are at this great institution of higher learning, you can go back to your community, not only once you've completed, but even during school holidays, and serve as an agent for change, because you are exposed to information and knowledge that your seniors and contemporaries in the village are not exposed to. And so if you find a way of becoming a change agent, you can inspire them to walk away from drug abuse. But of course, you may also have to use your exposure to mobilize other activities that would be meaningful to them. They may need musical instruments, and you may mobilize. In every community there are people who can sing and dance and so on. So to ensure that young people don't, end up as victims of drug abuse and substance abuse and so on. They have to be given the access to better ways of enriching their lives. And this may take, sports, it may take music, may take debating societies and so on. There are a whole range of activities that you can mobilize them around and rally them away from drug abuse. Sports is very important, in fact, in combating substance abuse, because, and today it's much easier because, people watch television, and whether it's lawn tennis or football, these sporting personalities are well paid today. In fact, they fetch fees that are mind-boggling. And so you can inspire the youth to say to them, you can actually become a Serena Williams, or you can become a Drogba in football or something like that. But in order to reach those levels, you've got to look after your body, and so ensure that you don't plant or put into your body things that are only going to destroy you, but that which will enable you to become this superstar and so on. I know it's a challenge, but as Madiba says, it always seems impossible until it is done. Thank you. Okay. I just signed. It's just okay. Thank you. Thank you. Just sign it. Yep.
President Motlanthe,
Thank you.
thank you very much for addressing us. There will be a formal thank you, so I don't want to do that right now. I would just like to call upon His Grace Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, who's going to read out a citation. We've had 2 prizes to award. The Archbishop will read the citation.
Thank you very much. The Archbishop Thabo Global Trust Prize for the Best Responsible Leadership Essay is this year shared by Carol Cuthbert and Sakile Nkomboti, MBA class of 2016. The citation reads, "The responsible leader motivates, develops, serves, and grows all people with whom she engages, creating an enabling environment to realize the organization's vision for all stakeholders within its greater environment, including the regulatory, social, and environmental aspects." Utilizing a tree analogy, Carol and Sakile showed that by nurturing the organization in its growth phase, the leader co-determines the values that must underpin and drive the organization. The leader co-directs this growth, encouraging a flexible, participative culture. This allows the tree to adopt and grow around obstacles as organizations finds itself within a wider system and must constantly adjust to its environment in a proactive manner. The leader must monitor the leaves for signs of disturbance and adjust accordingly. Like a tree bears fruit, the leader must empower all people by creating a climate where productivity, outputs, and outcomes are valued, ensuring that profit or fruits are optimized, but not at the expense of ecology, society, or the governance within the organization. In order to maintain a healthy organization, which resembles the figurative healthy tree, the leader will help to acknowledge that one leadership style may not be enough to address all the interconnected challenges that they are facing. Rather, they will have to adopt an integrated, responsible leadership style through applying a range of leadership styles in their approach, which most critically is authentic and sincere. That way, the tree will bear fruit for generations. And so we congratulate Carol and Sakile.
task is to call upon our MBA 2016 class president, Mr. Amina Moore, to express a vote of thanks. Thank you, Amina.
Honorable former President Motlanthe, His Grace Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, Vice Chancellor Dr. Caesar Mabizela, Professor Skay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you all. It is my privilege and a great honor to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this special occasion. On behalf of the Rhodes Business School, I'd like to extend a big thank you to our guest speaker tonight, Honorable former President Motlanthe, for gracing us with your presence and for sharing with us your continued inspiration and leadership. We have a small gift for you as a token of our appreciation. Archbishop Thabo Makgoba for making this event a reality. Thank you. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge on behalf of everyone that these events don't make themselves happen and they don't happen overnight. So I'd like to thank Professor Skay, the Rhodes Business School team, Rhodes University, all the staff involved in making tonight happen. Thank you.